Welcome back to our Bible study through the book of John. Today we are looking at John chapter 7. John chapter 7 is interesting in this fact that it is introducing us a little bit more to some of the family life of Jesus. In John chapter 7, it starts off by saying that Jesus went about in Galilee as opposed to in Judea, because in Judea the people were wanting to kill him. And it's always wise to stay away from areas where they want to kill you. Now, so you understand kind of a visual map. Judea is kind of down here. This is where Jerusalem, remember that, Jerusalem, Judea. It's the region where Jerusalem is, kind of right down here. You see that? Now, keep that right here. Right here is, well, excuse me, like this. This is the Nile. What in the world? The Nile River's in Egypt. The Jordan River, Tanner will cut that out. The Jordan River's right here. You're not going to cut that out. The Jordan River's right here, leading up to the Sea of Galilee. And by the Sea of Galilee is the region known as Galilee. So you have Judea, Galilee, in between is Samaria. All right, so it says Jesus is going around in Galilee. That's where a lot of his ministry is taking place. Actually, many of the disciples are from Galilee. But in Jerusalem, in Judea, the people were not liking Jesus. So many of the people, this is where a lot of the religious leaders were, and it makes sense because that's where Jerusalem is. Anyway, there is a feast that's going on, the Feast of Booths, and Jesus' brothers say, hey, you should go down there and make yourself known publicly. What's going on? And it tells us here in the text that they did not know who Jesus was. They did not believe in him. And if you're like me, at first when you read this, you're like, how would you not know? Jesus is in his early 30s, and they grew up with Jesus. But at this point, the light had not went on. My brother's the Messiah. My brother is the Son of God. But they didn't know this yet. And we might wonder how. How could you not know this? Well, hey guys, there's a couple reasons I think that are important for us to understand. First, the obvious one is this, that this was kept from them. This was kept from them by God. God was not allowing them this knowledge. As a matter of fact, he revealed it to Mary and Joseph when Jesus was born and a few other people there when the message was shared by the shepherds and others. But we are led to believe that a lot of Jesus' upbringing was pretty normal. Pretty normal. He first, after in Bethlehem, he moved to Egypt, and then from Egypt settled back into Nazareth, but his life was fairly normal. And to the point where his brothers, they didn't see any miraculous things. They didn't see Jesus perform any miracles. We do have the one instance where Jesus taught in the temple, but other than that, he wasn't weekly getting up when he was 8, 9, 10 years old on the Sabbath and teaching in synagogue. They were not doing that. Because when Jesus would go back to Nazareth, they would marvel at his teaching. Like, how do you get all this learning and this education? Where'd this come from? Because it wasn't until that time that he's going to be revealed to the people who he was and revealed to his brothers. Anyway, so Jesus ends up going down to this Feast of Booths, and he goes down in this area, and he begins to teach openly. It says, teach openly. And there is a division concerning Jesus. It says that people are careful. They're careful about how they talk about Jesus. And so they kind of whisper over here, whisper over here. They don't want the religious leaders, the chief priests, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin to catch them talking about Jesus and sharing their thoughts about Jesus. Some say Jesus is a good man, it tells us here in John chapter 7. Others say he's leading people astray. But it also tells us that they marvel at his teachings. They're stunned by his teachings, and primarily it is this: he teaches with authority. He teaches with an authority. He's not just teaching about something. He's teaching as if he has the authority over that topic, the law. He is teaching them with an authority that they're not accustomed to. I shouldn't touch that. And Jesus is causing a little bit of a stir among them. And here we see that people say, hey, this must be the Christ, because the Christ surely is not going to have more signs than this guy. And others are saying, no, he has a demon. Some say he is the Christ, he is the prophet. But others say, well, he can't because he's from Galilee. And this is going back to prophecy talking about the Messiah coming from Bethlehem, being an offspring of David. Now, I don't know, but they seem to not have the information about Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, or they're totally discounting that. They say, well, that don't count because he didn't really grow up there. Regardless, they're focusing on the fact that he's coming from Galilee. And they do not like it, for one thing, that the Messiah would come from Galilee. And they're saying that's not fulfilling of Scripture. But we know that Jesus' life does fulfill Scripture. Well, during his teachings, the leaders are becoming outraged by this, and they send people to arrest Jesus. They send him to arrest Jesus, but the people who have been sent to arrest him, they also marvel at the teaching of Jesus, to the point where they don't arrest him. They don't arrest him. When they come back, they say, nobody teaches like him. Nobody. And they say, you have been deceived. You guys have been deceived. And they start to rail on these officers and get onto them for not fulfilling their task of arresting Jesus. But then Nicodemus steps in. Remember Nicodemus just from a few chapters ago. In chapter 3, we were introduced to him. And here he comes up again. And in this point, when he's facing the religious leaders of his day, he begins to stick his neck out a little and stand up for Jesus. When he says, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? He's challenging them. Hey, shouldn't we figure out who Jesus is before we condemn him to death? And they want nothing of it. They'd say they want nothing of what Nicodemus is saying, and they put Nicodemus down, they shut him down, and they stay bent on this task of wanting to arrest Jesus and seeing him executed. Well, hey, tomorrow we're going to be looking at John chapter 8. I'll see you then.